Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.
Hello and welcome to Capes on the Couch, where comics get counseling. I'm Anthony Sitko.
And I'm Dr. Issues.
This is issue number 134, Emma Frost, as selected by our present level patron, Ruby. Emma is definitely one of those characters that if you go on the website, if you go on a capesonthecouch.com website, all of the episodes are categorized. And one of the primary things that I do to categorize them is, are they a hero or are they a villain? With Emma, I don't really know where to put her. Because she's been both.
Yep.
Even when she's a hero, she's an anti-hero. And then when she's a villain, she's a full-on bad bitch.
Yeah.
Definitely one of the more intriguing characters in terms of moral ambiguity that we see in comics. So let's jump right into it then. Emma Frost, created by Chris Claremont and John Byrne in X-Men number 129, January of 1980. Emma Frost was born to a wealthy family in Boston who had lived in the area since the 1600s. She discovered she had telepathic abilities while in high school, but refused to join the Xavier Institute. And when her manipulative father chose her as his heir, she opted to leave and make her own way. Her father picked her over her two sisters and a brother. The brother was a drug addict, and the two sisters, one of whom was kind of scheming and conniving, and the other one basically believed that it was her birthright. Emma was the one who really didn't care about the business at all. And that's why her father picked her, because he said, you've actually got what it's really going to take to run the business. And she says, you know what, Daddy, I'm done. I'm going to make my own way. I think she said she had $40 in a savings account to her name. So after attempting to seduce her professor, her family had her sent to the Essex Clinic, where she was drugged and manipulated into attacking the X-Men by Magneto. So she became a stripper for the Hellfire Club, where she made Sebastian Shaw infatuated with her, and she ended up becoming the White Queen. And this is where we meet her. This is her first appearance in X-Men as the White Queen, as part of the Hellfire Club. She also started a multinational business, Frost International, and began her own school, the Massachusetts Academy, where she recruited young mutants for her own cause. And then she ended up being attacked by a time traveler, and she was in a coma for a year. During that time, most of her students were killed. She was brought out of the coma by an energy surge that caused her consciousness to take over the body of Bobby Drake, a.k.a. Iceman, who happened to be in the room with her.
Because comics.
When she learned what happened to her students, she had a breakdown and realized they were better off with Xavier. And he was able to reestablish the connection between her body and her mind. So racked with guilt, she established her school as Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters, and she and Banshee started a new team called Generation X. After surviving an attack on Genosha, she discovered that she had a secondary mutation, the ability to turn her skin into unbreakable diamond. This, however, leaves her unable to utilize her telepathic abilities, so it's basically a trade-off. She joins the Xavier Institute and takes the Stepford Cuckoos under her wing. She began a psychic affair with Scott Summers, Cyclops, and you can go back and listen to our episode on him, #Scott is a dick, who was growing apart from Jean. Although Jean tore through her mind and forced her to relive all of her guilty episodes from the past, Emma revealed to Wolverine that she truly did, in fact, love Scott. Shortly thereafter, Beast discovered her shattered body, and the investigation revealed that Esme of the Cuckoos convinced another student to shoot Emma with a diamond bullet. Meanwhile, a Phoenix-powered Jean reassembled Emma, and you can hear a little bit more about that in our episode on the Stepford Cuckoos. So after Jean's death, which number that was, I don't know, Emma and Scott begin a actual relationship, and they become co-headmasters of the Xavier Institute. Emma then discovers that the Stepford Cuckoos were actually her children, bred from eggs that were harvested by a doctor years before, while she was under the control of the Essex Clinic. She served as a member of the Cabal, along Norman Osborn, Loki, Doctor Doom, Namor, and the Hood, only to betray Shaw. This was, I believe, during the Dark Reign story. And then in Avengers versus X-Men, Emma is one of the Phoenix Five. She was the next to last mutant to possess the Phoenix Force alongside Scott before he was able to wrest her portion away from her. And then Scott, as we all know, ends up getting killed by Xavier. And then in Inhumans versus X-Men, after a Terrigen cloud killed Scott, Emma created a psychic projection of him destroying the cloud, after which Black Bolt, quote unquote, killed the projection. A negotiated peace between the Inhumans and the X-Men ended after Emma incited the X-Men to take action to save their species. Medusa destroyed the cloud after realizing the death and destruction that it was causing, but Emma sent programmed Sentinels after the rest of the Inhumans to seek revenge for Scott's death. So she turns full villain, but then all is forgiven because she is currently one of the leaders of Krakoa and was named by Xavier and Magneto as the head of trade relations. This is under the Jonathan Hickman House of X Powers of 10 reboot / change / shift of all of the X-Men continuity. So that's currently happening right now. I believe there was the Hellfire Gal and somebody just died. I think Wanda just died.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. It was Wanda. I'm long overdue on getting caught up on those X books, but the X books were never really my purview. I was much more of an Avengers and Fantastic Four fan. Mutant books were something I've dabbled in over the years, but never really stuck with.
You make it sound like these are all different forms of addiction and they're just potentially spread. Avengers for you was the gateway drug.
Yeah, well, I mean, technically Spider-Man was really the gateway drug, but then it became Avengers, and then Moon Knight is really where I'm just mainlining that. Just, I dabble in the other stuff, but, I'm hooked on Moon Knight and Cap. Those are my heroin, so to speak. I can't call them heroin because they're men.
Wow, and I thought my puns were bad.
Oh, they are. Your puns are still really, really bad. So the issues that Ruby has requested that we cover, first and foremost, let's get it out of the way. It's the elephant in the room, her relationship with Scott. Now, it starts off because Scott is having some issues with Jean because she's dealing with Phoenix stuff, and Scott is not talking to Jean about this. So he really confides in Emma through this psychic link. Why Scott chooses to mentally cheat on a telepath with another telepath, I don't know. Of all the boneheaded decisions that Scott Summers has made, this is definitely up there. And this also just goes to the point of talk to your partners, people. Communication is so important. We've talked about this. I think it's been a running theme in the last couple episodes. We've been discussing communication. In any event, once Jean is out of the way, temporarily through the revolving door that is death, she begins an actual, honest relationship with Scott. But then Jean shows up again and throws it all in flux. So Emma's very much a woman on a yo-yo, if you want to think of it like that. That's not an easy position to be in, and it's not entirely her fault that she is in love with this man that does not treat her the way that she should be treated.
So I'm sure I've made this reference before, but I don't remember when and in what capacity, but I love it, so I'm just going to do it again. There's a Chris Rock bit where he points out some people, and I'm going to leave it gender neutral, but some people have the idea when they meet a couple, like one person is already your friend and they meet the other person, it's like, oh, I really do hope I find someone like that. And then there are those people that say,
I want them.
Exactly. So unfortunately, Emma is in this mix, and I'm going to bring it back. Forget the psychic thing, just the idea that there's nothing inherently wrong with having friends of friends and having a network that you confide in besides your spouse and whatnot. That's all actually potentially very positive. But you need to be clear what the boundaries are to begin with. And that didn't happen here. And that doesn't happen commonly. this is so overwhelmingly within the realm of not just possibility, I'll even dare say probability, where if you already have the ability to talk to someone at a level greater than just basic acquaintances and you actually are developing a friendship, all human interactions have the capability of being the best interactions in your life. That I genuinely believe that. They usually are not. They usually don't reach that level, but there's always that chance. And when you add in turmoil, you add in the idea that things are not the way you want them to be, and that means you're going to be looking for change, then that adds a level of intensity to interactions, especially when you make it clear from the start. I am talking to you because my motivation is to feel better about what is going wrong. Now, that doesn't have to lead to what I'm going to say, but it very well may. That can lead to the idea that this person is the solution to my problems. You're putting the onus on someone that may not recognize that's what they're involved in. Meanwhile, I'm going to flip it around. I'm going to flip it to Emma's side. Emma has had interactions with X-Men, has had situations where she has her own agenda in so many different spheres of life that finding someone that she doesn't have to manipulate is a great comfort. And yes, it's wonderful that now you can feel like you're yourself and you're learning about someone who clearly is in their own vulnerable state, and the heart wants what the heart wants. You start noticing that you have a connection. And what does Emma have this to compare to in terms of what's considered healthy in a relationship? Let's be real. I mean, she's had people I'm sure she's been with. That's not what I'm getting at. I'm saying the emotional side. I know they went with the telepathy part, but I think that was a great metaphor just for the idea that above and beyond just plain old physical attraction, you have found something in someone that transcends what you have expected in the past. So now you have this other person that was at a low point and is, raising themselves up. You have someone who has superficial experiences that's now getting something more deep, and you can't just turn that off. I know it's nice to say, okay, just let it go, but many times people can't. And if that's the case, then you're going to spend more time, which is another part of this. I know we talked about the communication piece, but the time together is also critical. And when you're spending much more time with another person, it's an example why many times work affairs happen, because you're with those people way more than you are with your own family. Same thing at school, same thing with anything that involves those daytime, wakeful, productive hours, while everything else is, no offense, I don't mean this in a negative way, but often considered superficial, recreational, or just plain old rest. So you're just trying to recover. You're trying to sleep. You're trying to eat, get your basic stuff done for survival, while not focusing much on the meaningful conversations that you could be having otherwise. So the opportunities that you end up with other people, even if it's not your primary relationship, that can be what happens. That's the first part. And I'm sorry if this is running long, because this is complicated. The other part, of course, is, well, whether or not it resulted in negative consequences, a divorce, or the other person that would have been involved leaves, or, as has been stated, a death, and now this other relationship has now blossomed. The question becomes, what do we do now? Because ironically, for some people, once again, not painting too broad a brush here, some people love the pursuit. Some people love the idea of an ongoing situation that is not quite in the open and not quite going to be accepted if it's found out. And the intrigue of all of that adds to the combinations of lust and interest and actual intellectual connection and all that other stuff.
It's the thrill of the taboo.
Exactly. So what happens when that's gone? Now you actually have an open license to do what you want. And for some people, it's a relief. Like, thank goodness we don't have to do things that way anymore. While for other people, it's a loss. Like, I'll never get that thrill back. And unfortunately, that's going to impact the intimacy. So now you've just flipped the tension that the person had before that built this whole thing up and resolved it in a way that leads to less love. That is so strange to think. And don't get me wrong, the way it's written, that didn't exactly happen here, but I'm just going from the biased psychiatrist who sees people when it's going wrong. So that's why I'm talking about it this way. You mentioned the whole yo-yo thing going on with Emma, and it doesn't have to be the same person. The whole point is, what if that person that you were involved with, where we've had this up and down wave already, what happens if another person enters, maybe even similar to the way you entered? This is something that doesn't have to stop at one point. This can happen serially. And if you don't know that about the person, or you are choosing to ignore that about the person's history, then you are setting yourself up on a roller coaster without any of the precautions. So I really hope you buckle up next time.
Well, I was going to say a couple of things. First off, it takes two to tango. So I do think, in defense to some extent, and mark this on your calendars, folks, in defense of Scott, Emma could have just as easily said, I don't want anything to do with this. You're coming to me, but you're married. I know you're married. This wasn't like a secretive marriage. This wasn't like, oh, he came to me, he was some stranger. You knew he was married. Yes, he confided in you. You kind of took it to another plane, literally another level. So it's not entirely Scott's fault. Secondly, to that last point that you were making about serially, I have heard, sadly, multiple stories of, say, person A and person B. Well, person A was using person B to cheat on person C. So A and C break up. Now A and B are together. B knew that A was cheating on C. And then they have the audacity to act surprised when A cheats on them with D. That's how you got started with this person. I'm not saying this happens all the time, but it clearly happens more than once, because I've heard from multiple people. And they're like, I didn't think they would cheat on me. And listen, I'm not trying to poo-poo people. Things change. People change. But it takes a lot for somebody to change that kind of behavior. It takes an internal resolution. And it's not something where, oh, they just cheated because they didn't have it good enough. I'm what they need now. They don't need to cheat anymore. If that's your modus of thinking, you are clearly delusional. And I don't have a degree, nor do I need one to say that. But if you think that they were just cheating until they met you and that you're the one who's going to get them to stop cheating, get yourself some smelling salts and wake up. So I'm not 100%. So to bring this back to Scott and Emma, to that point, I don't think Emma's delusional enough to say that Scott was cheating until he met me, because she can read his mind. That's the thing that she has that brings this outside the realm of reality. She can read his mind. But I do appreciate how they've discussed that, and it hasn't just been ignored. But like I said, that's kind of on Emma to put herself in that situation. And then when Jean inevitably comes back, Emma better be accepting of whatever Scott's decision is with that.
Yeah, well said, man.
So Ruby's next suggestion is her love for mutants and her willingness to sacrifice all for them, regardless of personal impact. And she referenced there's an alternate universe. I think Ruby said it was Old Man Logan. Emma marries Dr. Doom in order to protect mutant kind. And for all of her flaws, and she is a diamond with a lot of flaws, she does love her people. That's one of the things that she wanted to teach. That's one of the reasons why she started the Hellions, is she did have this sincere belief that I can help these mutants be better. And she has a legitimate breakdown in front of Xavier and said, they were better off with you. The Hellions and everything that happened in Genosha, that they wouldn't have died had they been under Xavier's care, which I find specious how many X-Men have died at the hands of Charles Xavier. But she does sincerely love mutants. And I think that's one of the most positive aspects to her character. It's a bit speciesist, but it is a positive aspect of the character.
So I'm going to expand on that just a little bit. The idea that you're passionate about some section of life, of existence. So the stereotype that sometimes we think of is, if you want to take it to the negative side, is the crazy cat lady. The person that just absolutely has to take
You mean my wife?
Oh my God.
I'm kidding, babe. I love you.
The idea, though, that you're taking in every single stray and be they super feral or super nice, or maybe someone else's cat that probably has their collar, but you magically just lost the tags and you're saying, oh, it's mine now. Taking it too far. That's one end of it. The end that we're talking about, and let's leave it to humans, just the idea that, let's say you're a proponent for homeless shelters and you volunteer all of your spare time and actually at some point make your career in a nonprofit. Or some people that are very spiritual and have a church and they go every day and they know every single person in the congregation and absolutely get the true joyous experience. They go to prayer services during the week. They do lots of other activities, picnics on Saturdays, after service on Sundays, all these different things. And it really gives them a sense of purpose. Or it's just their own family, just their own kids. And they know that throughout their life, they're going to follow them around. They get them their house, like right next to where they're going to in college. And they make sure that they do the yearly family vacation somewhere and everybody goes along and it's always these wonderful memories, et cetera, et cetera. I'm saying these are all great things. I'm not even saying any of this sarcastically, and I'm not trying to make it a potentially negative issue. What happens when you add activism to it? And this is where we really get into the heady stuff. And actually, I think that this does dovetail nicely if you look back on an episode with Scott in terms of his views on mutant kind. But Scott is much more of the, pardon the pun, like much more militaristic about it. Emma is much more of the true martyrdom about it. Just the idea that for once the greater good is way more important, or this section that I love so much is worth everything. If you're willing to sacrifice everything you have for the sake of the well-being of that particular interest of yours, then if it is a disaster, that can be truly society changing. And we've seen that happen. The question is, what's your judgment of a disaster? If things are not going well for a little bit, and you're basically saying that I'm willing to just up and move my family to the mountains in a cabin in the woods because I think everyone is against us and we're going to become the next Mansons, like that might be taking it a bit too far if the only question was you lost your job and you're, out of work for a couple of weeks to a month. There's always a matter of where you're interpreting what the threats are to what you love and how you're going to respond to it. So, yes, it's clear mutants were under attack. And that's probably always going to be true. And if you're willing to put in so much effort and energy to make sure that they survive, that's wonderful. And I commend her for it and everything that she does for it, but also to recognize that many of the decisions, therefore, that she's going to make are going to be intensely emotion-based. That could potentially be a problem. And recognizing that ahead of time, rather than making the decision and then wondering what the fallout's going to be, it can be humongous. I'd much rather say, I thought of all the different possibilities, and in my heart of hearts, this is the one that I think is going to work out best, rather than say, I feel a certain way about this situation, so this is what I'm doing. I hope it works out. There's a subtle difference in those two things, but if you catch it, my goodness, your quality of life can really go up.
I wouldn't say it's subtle at all. No, I'm being serious. I don't think that the distinction between those two is subtle at all. I think it's comes down to the folks who have the wherewithal and the intelligence / self-awareness to say, my opinion and my feelings on a matter are not the end all be all, that they are factors. And certainly we should be able to act on our feelings and our beliefs, but be aware that there's going to come some ramifications from that, and that not everyone is going to have those same beliefs and feel the same passion that you do, and may in fact feel the same passion that you do for the opposite belief. And in that case, how do you cope with that? I think that is a lesson that a lot of us need to be reminded of on the regular, especially in this day of polarization and clickbait headlines designed to stir that emotional response and get you acting just based on that spurt of dopamine or adrenaline, whatever the case may be. I had a point and I forgot where I was going with this. The ultimate thing is just, again, acknowledge that it's good to feel passion about something, and it's good to act in furtherance of that passion. Just be aware that not everybody's going to be on your wavelength. And even for someone like Emma, who can manipulate people and who can read their minds and or get them to do what she wants, that's still not really a good thing. So the last thing then is Ruby wants to talk about her role in Inhumans versus X-Men, where she is ultimately revealed as the villain. And again, I think this segues nicely with the last topic, where she does it out of a love for mutants, because the Terrigen Mists, which for those who don't know, the Terrigen Mists are what give the Inhumans their powers. But it turns out that the Terrigen Mists also have a basically fatal effect on anyone carrying the X gene. And we can get into the whole meta as to why Marvel was trying to kill off the X-Men and for, to support the Inhumans because of film rights, et cetera, et cetera. It's all been rendered moot because Disney owns everything now. But the point is that the X-Men were working together. Beast in particular was trying to find a scientific solution, a cure, or a way to inoculate the X-Men against this death because of the Terrigen Mists. Emma just said, well, to hell with all that. We're just going to destroy this cloud, even if it means there will be, pun semi-intended, no more Inhumans. And the Inhumans, to their credit, were aware that this was going to happen, so they were prepared for war. But the lengths to which Emma went to unleash the Sentinels to go after the Inhumans, even after Medusa destroyed the Terrigen Cloud, strictly based on the seeking revenge for Scott because he died after exposure. I get that she was angry, and I'm not going to be so sexist as to say that she's the angry woman or this was an emotional response. It was an emotional response. I will not say it's because she was an angry woman or because her boyfriend, whatever, was killed. I will say it was an emotional response. But I think even for somebody like Emma, who had to this point been kind of skirting that line, being just on that side of good, she just took a hard left and went full on villain for the first time in several years. I'm kind of curious what would lead to that kind of irrational decision making.
I love the fact that you just said irrational decision making, because there is an author of 2 books that I absolutely love. The author's name is Mark Manson. No relation to the Mansons, although I made a reference earlier. No relation whatsoever. But the 2 books are The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F and Everything is Effed, a book about hope. you would think from those names that he's trying to be provocative. And of course he is. I mean, the title is meant to be provocative because obviously you're going to get a few people just for the shock value. Oh, I got to read this, But no, it's actually, both of them are incredibly intellectual books. And he has a newsletter that he sends an email every week. The reason why I'm bringing it up is because one of the points that he makes is that in a modern society that is anywhere near democratic, and by that, I'm not talking about political parties or even just whether or not it's a democracy versus a monarchy or whatever. The point is, if you have a group of people with enough different cultural backgrounds and different circumstances, you come to a conclusion that there is always going to be awkwardness. There's always going to be a sense of tension amongst people. And we, as Anthony has said so many times, we do have a theory of how we've made social contracts with one another that as long as it doesn't pass a certain threshold, we're not going to totally destroy each other and destroy the planet. So the question always becomes, what is the thing or multiple factors of things that lead to it getting out of whack? I don't have an issue with the way it's presented that these clouds that are responsible for something very good for one group of people or one group of beings is negative to another group of beings, and they are now coming to a negotiation. The difference with Emma compared to many of the other people involved in this is the other people involved came to the conclusion, you know what? The survival is more important than the gain or the loss. The fact that we're going to have enough people around or enough beings around, that's good enough. We can always look to make it better in the future, but that part, that's good enough. That is what we call win-win negotiation. The problem is Emma is doing win-lose, and she was doing it from the start. So the first part of the win-lose was, okay, whatever mutants lose, that means that Inhumans are gaining, which may or may not be true. Parts of it are true, but not all of it. But then also, her point is, the only way for mutants to win is for Inhumans to lose. And there was severe disagreement about that. When you are dealing in a situation where one party is doing win-win negotiations and another party is doing win-lose negotiations, guess what? In all honesty, now everybody's doing win-lose because the balance necessary to do win-win negotiations needs full buy-in from everyone that it's possible. Once one individual, or at least an influential individual in either party, if we're saying it's a two-party system, once one individual that's influential enough in one of those parties decides to go win-lose, then the entire thing gets thrown out of whack. And you're going to have a challenge. It doesn't have to be a war. But it's going to be a lot of acrimony. It's not good. Then you add the part that, as Anthony mentioned, and I love how this all just dovetails together, you made it personal. So the fact that she firsthand knew what happened to the person that she loved, that individual negative event now is catastrophized to the idea that it's going to happen to everyone, and that's just as bad for everyone as it is for me. Is that fair to say? I mean, it's bad. It's definitely bad. Scott dying sucks, but that doesn't mean everybody's going to grieve the way that she was, but she's going to grieve pretty hard. And to go as far as she did in terms of the ruse, in terms of the manipulation, and then on top of that, she went so far as to say, you know what? Even if you guys don't fall for what I'm doing here, I'm just saying, screw you. And that's when we get into ad hominem attacks. For people that don't know what that means rather than having, let's say, a debate on the merits of the values of what you are talking about in a particular topic, you are now insulting the person regardless of what the topic is. So in other words, this isn't about like, oh, I actually think, just to make it lighthearted, I actually think this person is the greatest football player ever. And your response is, well, you still wet the bed at night. So it's a completely different level. The reason I'm bringing it up is because that's how Emma is processing things. She's not processing things in a way that is actual true intellectual discourse. She's processing it in a way as, I'm going to win at all costs, and I want to make sure that you suffer as you lose. As you said, that's full on heel, man. That's the type of, when a person gets to that point, then I'll be very honest with you, that's where you're no longer negotiating. You're trying to construct your survival. And if you could somehow salvage what the other person is experiencing in the process so that you get something to remain at the other side, rather than just saying the other way, F you, I'm going to win, then that's all well and good in sports. That's all well and good in video games, but that's not good in society. And I shudder to think that originally I was going to say, I don't think this needs to be said, but actually, yeah, it does. It really does. For those of you out there that feel like you're on that brink, where you feel like there is another side out there that is so far gone, recognize that there's a huge probability that they haven't thought about win-win in a while. There's still a chance for them to do that if you're willing to present whatever it is that you disagree about, if you're willing to present a way to say, how can we make sure we all survive first and then all build off of that, rather than saying, I have to win and therefore you have to lose and it has to be painful.
I absolutely 1,000% agree with you. What do you do, though, if you are presented with a situation where you are trying to present it as a win-win and the other person is so deep down that win-lose rabbit hole that they will cut off their nose to spite their own face as long as you lose? What do you do in that type of situation? I'm asking legitimately because I'm certain that there are a fair number of our listeners who would be very curious to find out, how do you engage with someone like that?
That is a great question. There's a couple of ways to handle it. First, we have to discuss the magnitude. If we're talking about a situation where you actually, it's not just important to you, but actually it would be very painful if you quote unquote lost, then like I said, then you really do have to start shifting your mindset. But here's the thing. We have the opportunity usually to find a way to extract ourselves from most situations. Not all. I'm not claiming that. But your definition of what constitutes a painful loss can also change. That's the part that a lot of times people don't anticipate, because the motivation behind someone in a win-lose scenario, as I said, it's not just the gain of the victory, it's actually the triumph of avoiding misery. And if that's the case, then the best thing you can do is, if it's possible, once again, it may not be possible. You may just be in a dogfight, but if it's possible, if you can demonstrate that even a minor loss doesn't affect you nearly as much as they thought it would, then you start to neutralize their own emotional response to it. In other words, if you're able to actually be that gracious loser, if it came down to it, I'm not saying lose, I'm saying if you do happen to be in a situation where it appears that this person is going to say, haha, you lost, it's like, hey man, it happens sometimes. I really do think there's another way, but I got you. And, maybe we'll do this again sometime. Thanks. And, take care. And if you can do that consistently.
Take the wind out of their sails.
Oh, yeah. Oh, big time. Big time. That's one way. The other way, and as I said, I'm hesitating to say this in a way that this should not be the number one point, but there are certain situations in life where you have your convictions and it may be a matter of your own sake of survival, then by all means, you have a right to stand your ground. I would never take that person's right away to do that. I would just caution everyone that those situations are way less common than you think. I'm going to repeat that because it's that important. The situations where you think you have to bite down, bear down, grin, and just fight tooth and nail for everything you got, every single scrap, every single inch, just so that you survive for your next breath, in modern society, with rare exceptions, are very uncommon. Relieve yourself of that burden. Because if you feel like every single potential debate or circumstance is something that you have to grit and fight, tooth and nail till you win, that makes for great stories, which is why we read comics. But that doesn't make for potentially a great life.
No, it absolutely does not. And it makes for a very, very stressful life. We're really not a political show, so I don't want to get into the corollaries between what you're saying and some of the impacts on real world individuals. Suffice to say that the whole notion of the X-Men serving as an allegory for minorities just continues to resonate well 50 years past their creation. Yeah, it's nuts. The intellectual in me would like to totally agree with your argument and say, and your discussion and say, this is how it should be. It should all be this simple. The realist in me says, no way in hell that's going to happen. Not without a drastic sea change. And even then, I used to think such a thing was possible. I used to think there was a limit to that. And then COVID happened. Now I don't know. I used to think that there was a limit to which people would say, you know what, we're all in this together. Let's all help each other out. I used to believe it was that kind of external threat. I'm not 100% certain now. It's like the end of the Watchmen comic.
Mm-hmm.
If the giant blue octopus came crashing down in the middle of Times Square, I now believe that there's a solid percentage of the population who would take the side of the octopus and who would say, I'm glad it killed those people. I'm glad it destroyed those buildings. It wasn't that bad. And this, that, and the other. I'm firmly of that mindset now after everything I've seen over the last year and a half. And
I'm not,
I'm way more of an optimist than you are. And so for me to make that kind of statement.
And yet, having said that, I'll point out, I don't disagree with you, but I think that number is not as large as it could be. I'll leave it at that. I'm not
people died.
That's wow. You took that way the opposite. No, my point was in terms of those people that are taking the side of the octopus. I'm saying if you really had to just split second, say, okay, who's on what side? I'm saying that it would be lopsided. And maybe that is the surprising optimist in me. Because my point is that there is a certain threshold that has to be met just for us to exist. We've been able to do it now for thousands of years. I'm not sure we need to be pessimistic to the point that we think it's about to end in the next 100 or so.
I hope for the sake of our respective children and any future children that they might have, that you're right.
And here's the thing, even if I'm wrong, what does that do for you individually? How does that affect your own mentality in terms of interacting with others? Because that's really what I'm getting at. I'm a psychiatrist. I'm not a sociologist. So I'm not trying to say that this solves the ills of what is underlying much of this. I'm not saying that we don't need to continue to fight in terms of making sure that the world has things that are more equitable. I'm not saying that there are things that shouldn't have wars. I'm saying that for each individual, depending on what you're doing in the moment, having that war in yourself nonstop might be more detrimental than beneficial.
It's a fair assessment. We got deep AF on this one. So we are going to take a break and plug, speaking of assistance and getting some of these things off your chest, we're going to plug our sponsor, BetterHelp. You can contact them. Go to betterhelp.com/capesinthecouch for 10% off your first month. And we're going to plug some of our friends. And then when we get back, we'll get into treatment. Stay tuned. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. Is there something interfering with your happiness or preventing you from achieving your goals? BetterHelp will assess your individual needs and match you with a licensed professional therapist. You can begin communicating within 48 hours.
It isn't a crisis line. It's not self-help. It's professional counseling done securely online. BetterHelp has a network of over 15,000 counselors with a broad range of expertise. You can log in and message your counselor anytime and get timely and thoughtful responses. You can also schedule regular video or phone sessions. No waiting room required.
BetterHelp is committed to facilitating great therapeutic matches, so they make it easy and free to change counselors if you feel you don't have a good connection. It's more affordable than traditional offline counseling, and financial help is available. BetterHelp wants you to start living a happier life today. Visit betterhelp.com/capes, that's better HELP, and join the over 1 million people taking charge of their mental health with the help of an experienced professional.
Special offer for Capes on the Couch fans. Get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/capes.
Do you love movies and psychology?
Do you want to know what it would be like if Batman was in your therapy office?
Listen to our podcast, Popcorn Psychology. 3 therapists dissect blockbuster movies, available everywhere you find podcasts.
Hello, I'm Chris Claremont. You're listening to Capes on the Couch.
And we're back. So, in-universe treatment, and we'll see if we continue the level of seriousness that we had before the break, or if we can introduce some levity, maybe?
So, as has been my want, depending on the circumstance, we're in comics, so I know what Emma's powers and abilities are. I'm actually not that interested in the telepathy or any of the mind stuff. You would think I'm a psychiatrist. That would be the first thing. Well, no, because she'll beat me at that. My thing is her secondary. The idea that she can become this like diamond person, and it's actually written that her entire demeanor changes with that to one that's much more cold, calculating, things like that. And if you want to see someone that's truly on the far end of that, you could check out our Mr. Freeze episode. But the whole point is she doesn't have that telepathy. So what is a person with mental abilities that no longer has mental abilities? They're a person. That's it. And how long does she get to be in that space? It's always under threat. It's always under duress. That's not a healthy way to be. So I'm wondering if there may be a way to just focus on that part where she's hardened herself. I think there's something there. I would love to just focus on that for a while. And I recognize that there's a risk that she learns from me through all that process that she can actually have all of her powers all at once and then just become the most dominant entity on the planet and just, rules with an iron fist and just, yeah. But she could end up being a much more empathic, emotional person that learns how to negotiate situations in a way that doesn't always have to be win-lose. So, there's a potential upside.
I think it would be a fabulous fist with a long glove on it. Very fashionable fist. But she would still rule the world with it.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So out of universe, let's take away the powers and just focus on what we know. She was born into a very wealthy family. She had no need for anything. She was the quintessential spoiled brat growing up to a distant and emotionally manipulative father who really only cared for business. The mother was addicted to various substances as a way to cope with the fact that she was emotionally dead inside. She was willing to be married to the father for all of the trappings that this life brought without any regard for the impact. So this is the house in which she grew up. Her brother was gay and was basically excommunicated from the family, turned to drugs as a result of the turmoil. One of the sisters, I believe, came after her and tried to kill her because she went off and did her own and made her own way. And I'm not trying to slut shame in any way, shape, or form, but she entered the sex trade as a way to work her way up to a position of wealth and power. And so she was forced to put herself into positions to be, quote unquote, submissive to men in order to give them what they wanted so that she could get the power. If you take all of the powers away from Emma and just look at everything that she's gone through, this is still a woman who's dealing with a lot of trauma, a lifetime of terrible things that have happened to her, many of which are not her fault. And it's a testament to her durability, no pun intended, that she has managed to survive as long as she has and thrive as long as she has. But there is still a lot of underlying trauma. And so looking at everything that she has gone through, And then we'll add to that the loss of her students.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she was a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Her students died while she was in a coma. We'll say she was away, she was indisposed, whatever the case may be.
Mm-hmm.
The students under her care died. And she was dealing with a lot of that grief. There's a lot of stuff in Emma Frost's story that would have broken a lesser woman. And it's a credit to her that she continues to stand and thrive as well as she has. But what would you say to a real person who has undergone some of the horrific trauma that Emma Frost has experienced?
I would first say, hi, I'm doctor, and I know that, I know nobody really wants to go through these therapy sessions or things like that, but so far I've had some decent experiences handling cases like this, but everyone's unique. So tell me, what's going on and what brought you here to my office? Because this is what I do every day. I actually hear these types of cases, maybe not every single detail the exact same way. This really is incredibly common. And usually the diagnoses that I see related to these cases are a combination of some form of mood disorder, such as major depression or bipolar, PTSD, generalized anxiety, and then on the other part of the scale, usually something related to borderline personality disorder. So you have that cluster, and then of course you have the family history, potentially, some sort of substance use, which often is used as a coping mechanism for all the things that have happened. So as much as you laid out what is a truly traumatic and dramatic life that is unfolded for this person, for them, it's their everyday normal. And the sooner that you recognize that, the sooner you realize, because even as you were describing it, I could hear the emotion in your voice about the trauma. The thing is, for them, they may be living out that emotional trauma through others, and they may yell and scream about different things, but they're doing it reactionary to the rest of the world. They're not doing it about their life and what they've experienced because they've survived it. So there's a certain perspective that if you lose it, you really start to alienate yourself from that person, and they'll just look at you as just another outsider that is judging them. So you have to be really careful. The irony of saying that you're empathic and it can backfire, that is something that when I say we, I really do mean collective we, therapists, human beings in general, when it comes to a person that's experienced certain levels of trauma, they don't necessarily want to hear all that. I'm so sorry it happened. Like, I admit I have to be careful, which is why when I gave my introduction, the way I was talking, that was intentional. I'm not trying to put a ton of emotion into it. I'm trying to stay as level-headed and matter-of-fact as it is, because they'll know that, yes, this is something that can be talked about commonly without the intense reactions of everything else. And setting that as the standard is incredibly important, at least in my experience. And my bias, which is dealing with people that are in an inpatient unit or in an emergency room, which means that they're usually at their most heightened state when it comes to their reactions. That's one point. The other part of this is getting the buy-in that experience can be so far different than anything else that they want out of life. And usually I'm getting them on the other side. In other words, they've already started to see what other people do. They realize not everybody had an abusive parent. Not everybody had siblings that were ostracized. Not everybody in their own vocation. And I'll throw in something that you may not have said it this way, but I'll add basically the gravity to it. Something that you significantly care about so much that you make it your life's work. It's your purpose. And it gets totally taken away from you. The type of thing that some people really don't ever recover from. That part is difficult. And not to say that the other parts aren't, but that part is one that I struggle with, and I have to keep my own emotions in check, because that's one of my points where I start to emotionally break down, because I recognize the injustice and unfairness of the situation. And while I can give glimpses to point out, like, that's that's just not right, or that's just not the way it should be. At the same time, saying sometimes it's a matter of creating a third party example. In other words, I don't want to give an example from my life because the person starts to attach to me in a way that may not be healthy. But if I can find an analog, and sometimes it's a struggle, you may not be able to do it in that session, finding an analog of how someone may have processed that type of similar negative event and had the type of emotional growth that allowed them either to find something else that became a new purpose or to repurpose, to maybe be in the same area and yet not become so jaded from previous experiences that they recognize those positive emotions are still there. And that positive motivation can still carry forth even when you've had negative evidence. Doing all of this is the type of thing that allows you to recognize a person's immature attachments. And I don't mean immature as in childish. I mean immature as in you're doing it for the sake of survival the way that someone does if they were dangling from a cliff and someone reached out a hand. Except you're not doing that in that realistic circumstance. You're doing it when someone's just saying hi and like they hold the door for you. And now they think you think they're your greatest friend and greatest compadre. And I've seen patients react this way. Like they basically say, oh yeah, I'm going to live with this person when I leave and all that. Like, as you hinted at before, like almost near delusional in terms of how they're processing some of this information, because it's what they know how to do to manipulate. And they're starting to believe their own manipulations. This is the type of stuff that if it's not put in check and not processed in a way that allows the person to have the full range of emotion they should, it's messy. There's no other way to put it. It is really, really messy.
Wow. Yeah. I got nothing to add to that. I said a lot earlier. I'm going to shut up and give you your space. So, with the help of our friend Chris over at the Marvelous Madams podcast, we'll have links to them in the show notes. And she's also a fellow Jersey girl. She is going to help us get Emma Frost on Dr. Issues' couch.
Hello, Emma. I'm Dr. Issues.
And we're starting off with lies.
Excuse me.
That's not your name, and we both know it.
Surely, if you've read my mind, you're also aware of the multiple attempts on my life. Not to mention, as a mutant, you can appreciate the need for a pseudonym to maintain some level of privacy to protect loved ones. Ms. White Queen, or is it Black Queen? Or Black King? Or Ice Princess?
Your point is taken. Still, just know that any effort to mislead or lie to me will be swiftly shut down. I do not suffer fools.
Nor would I expect you to. So what did you change?
Come again?
I'm not gullible. Telepath or not, delving into someone's mind changes the person in some fundamental way. That's the point of therapy. You did that to me without regard for my thoughts on the matter. Literally. So I'm asking you, with all candor, what did you change?
I'm not an amateur at this, What I told you is what I sought. Judging by your facial expression, you don't believe me.
It's fascinating. Sometimes I mirror expressions, mime voices of those who are talking to me. It's not intentional. As a matter of fact, I've been in some awkward situations because the person thought I was mocking them. But not this time, though. And I'm right. So why are you so skeptical of sessions like this?
Because those with my abilities already accomplish what you do hundredfold, without the baggage of small talk getting in the way. I told you, I don't suffer fools, and the same goes for bullshit.
Kind of like a sentience surgeon. I'm glad you're on that path of logic, because society has determined consent to be a major hallmark of ethics in every interpersonal undertaking.
Is that what you think I do? Mental assault?
I'm trying to understand. No offense, but it's clear that you know how to work a room regardless of mutant abilities. I'm trying to figure out if it's your main coping strategy or a backup plan.
It's been both.
Can you give an example of each?
Sure. I'll give you a glimpse of one of my best days. And one of my worst. So, you tell me, Doctor, would you have done anything differently?
Whoa. To be honest, I have no idea. I've been empathic before, but that was like mimetic, like just cloning your own goals. No, telemimetic. It's like you downloaded parts of your memory into my brain and I choose how to live it. This is so bizarre. They both involve Scott. I shouldn't be surprised.
Is there a problem, Doctor? I can assure you, I did nothing to injure your brain.
No, not like that. That's what you changed.
Oh dear, that was too quick. I expected some sort of opportunity to talk about him at length, without all of the pretense.
You're the one you said you hate small talk. That's my co-host view, not mine. I'll gladly discuss your feelings about him without referencing.
He's not a dick. Got it?
Got it. The point is, he impacts every aspect of your life, and your love for him affected some questionable choices. What can I do to help you to get to the next stage of your relationship as adults?
Why would there be a next stage? I know he's loved me. That's all I need.
And he's loved another. And you turned his ideals into the grandest effigy I could imagine, all out of spite.
Spite? No. Having some mental foreplay when you least expect it may have some spite, but not when all of mutant kind is at stake. It was us or them, and it surely wasn't going to be us. Not when we're the next evolution of the species. I am not the damsel in distress. I'm the diamond in the rough. I can show you, too.
Fascinating. Oh, now the therapy can begin.
What does that mean?
Before now, you had the ultimate wisdom of the crowds through your abilities, just picking things up about each person on a whim. Now, when you're like this, I know you're shut off. I don't think that's a mistake. Maybe it's a defense mechanism for you, but I see it as a chance for growth. Tell me, what do you feel right now?
Nothing.
Can you tell by my face what I think?
You have the same face as when I told you I only looked at one thought in your mind. I should register that as the same, but it's so difficult this way.
Exactly. Welcome to a new way to build your schema of the world. No mind games, just good old-fashioned observation, trial and error. No judgment, no scorecard, just me and you trying to figure out human interaction. I don't expect you to stay this way, but do you realize just how magnificent your personal experiences can be if you learn how to warm up your cold side?
There is a rationale to your style. I think I like it? That is quite the challenge. Definitely worthy of pursuit. Fine. Your point stands.
Wait, now I do think Scott is...
Say it and lose yours.
Understood.
Thank you, my dear. Now, if you'll excuse me, I must return to Krakoa. Heaven knows what Logan's gotten himself up to in the past hour. I shall return.
When shall I...
Oh, I'll make it clear. Good day, Doctor.
Boy, she's really hung up on the whole Scott as a dick thing.
Well, somebody in this group decided that it was going to be a big part of what we do. Not placing any blame anywhere. Not that I'm bitter or anything, having to fend off some people that are really big Cyclops fans.
Speaking of being fans, we are huge fans of the Marvelous Madams podcast. Thank you so much to Chris for playing Emma this week. You can check out the Marvelous Madams podcast wherever you find podcasts or at themarvelousmadams.com, MADAMES. Chris and Amy talk about the Marvel Cinematic Universe, movies and shows, but covering topics that you won't necessarily hear in most other type podcasts. It's quite entertaining to get their take on it. So check them out. And again, thank you so much, Chris. We appreciate you taking the time to help us out with the show. Recommended reading is Generation X. She plays a large role in that book, even though it is so 90s. It's so 90s. The art, the writing, everything, but it's still a quality story. And then The Death of X, which leads up to and is related to Scott's death, leading up to the Inhumans versus X-Men. And it's one of those books that kind of, spoiler alert, you think it's all about Scott, only to reveal that Scott is dead. And the Scott that we've been seeing is a mental projection created by Emma. And then so much of it's one of those things that like where as you read it and then you get towards the end, you go back and you reread it and you're like, oh, like it like a Rashomon kind of thing, where like it's a little different, the second time around because of what you know. So check that out. Next episodes, Starfire, Children of Supervillains, and Squirrel Girl. And also want to take the opportunity to say that we will be guesting on our friends, Popcorn Psychology. We're going to be talking the movie Black Panther. We'll do an episode on T'Challa soon. We'll add that to the roster. I don't think we'll have enough time to fit it in to schedule it exactly when the episode drops, which should be in a couple of weeks. But we'll get T'Challa in there. As always, you can find all of our episodes on our website at capesonthecouch.com. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We've got a Patreon page, patreon.com/capesonthecouch, where you can subscribe and unlock cool additional content, uncensored material, early access, etc., etc. And join our Discord. We've got links in the show notes to join the awesome community that we're building there, so you get an opportunity to chat with other fans of the show about all manner of different topics. Doc?
Wait a minute. White Queen Frost took over someone's body and did a whole bunch of stuff with ice. I really think Emma just needs to let it go.
Let it go, let it go. Can't read your mind anymore.
Okay, that was good. That was good. I appreciate that.
You are welcome. For Doc Issues, I'm Anthony Sitko. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.
Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.